Mali's popular romance novels are helping to challenge traditional notions of womanhood in the West African nation. It's hoped that the books will inspire more women in the country to read as well as pen their own tales, as Helen Percival now reports for us.
In the Malian language Bambara is the word for love. It's also the title given to an unprecedented collection of romance novels. The stories, all written by women, tell tales of young couples caught between tradition and the modern world. They're giving a rare voice to women's intimate feelings. And it's hoped they will also encourage more women to read in a country where as few as 1 in 4 women are literate.
The fact that readers can relate to each other, the setting, the problems, the characters, means this could perhaps break the negative impression they have of reading.
Mali has one of the world's worst literacy rates. Though more adult men can read and write than women, it's still less than half the population. But young women have found inspiration through these new role models.
They do very well at school. I'd like to be like them. And on top of that, they behave very well. They have good jobs in good companies, and they are very well paid.
The novels also blend Mali's traditional cultures with modern influences.
The relationships we experience every day, that's what I try to bring to my writing, because it's the reality. We think it's only in Western countries, but that's not the case. How can a young Malian woman have an online romance? That's what we can discover.
Vivre une histoire d'amour par Internet. 5 Jarabi titles have already been published, with more in the pipeline. It's hoped this will help Malians turn the page on a way of life where reading has been neglected and help give rise to the country's next generation of writers.
Well, this play was first staged in London at the National Theatre 25 years ago, and now it's in its first professional production in London. Written by South African playwright Athol Fugard, My Children, My Africa is set in 1984 at the heart of apartheid as 2 opposing forces struggle for the soul of Thami, a young, brilliant black man. Well, joining me in the studios, the co-director Deborah Edgington and Nathan Ives-Moiba, who plays Thami. Welcome to Arise. Thank you both for coming in. I suppose, Deborah, firstly, what attracted you to wanting to produce this play? It's not been shown in London for a long time.
It's a beautiful play, and Athol Fugard is one of South Africa's greatest writers. And it's a play that is really powerful, it's explosive, it's heart-wrenching, and it is very relevant, even though it was written in 1989.
Nathan, it's set in a segregated South Africa at the heart of the apartheid. You have a black teacher who's trying to convince a student that education is the way forward, not violence. What was it about your particular character that you were drawn to?
Well, the fact that he is tired of the status quo. You know, the teacher is encouraging education as a means of rebellion, as a means of freeing his mind and changing the status quo, changing apartheid. And he sees it as not working. It's a process that his parents have been through, people before him have been through, and it hasn't worked for them. Things haven't changed. He's still under the ban to education, and he sees a more vigorous and a more armed revolution as a more progressive way of bringing about change in his lifetime or even his grandchildren's lifetime. So for him, words aren't enough. He needed action as well.
I mean, we didn't, it's nowhere near a comparison, but we saw big disturbances in London with the riots, where we saw a lot of youth who were disgruntled, who maybe through education haven't been able to have a voice, and then they turn to violence. Do you think young people today can still relate to a play like that?
Definitely. It's all about people being disenfranchised and not being connected and feeling isolated and not a part of the community that they're living in, so they turn to violence, rightly or wrongly. That's why people do these things, and that's why my character turns to violence or turns to a more active form of demonstration. You know, they boycott the schools and they don't want to participate in Bantu education, even though the teacher says education, then freedom. right?
Yes.
And then they say freedom, then education. So it's just that sort of young mindset, impatient, headstrong, following your heart, and, you know, the older, wiser years, practicing patience and saying, you know, this is not the way forward, this will end in blood and tears.
I mean, one of the main questions the play asks is, does violence, do you fight violence with violence? And I think that is the message of the play. And Athol Fugard actually believed that words were a form of action. And
well, they would still remain, wouldn't they? I mean, with violence, the act is over, whereas with words, they are immortalised.
There's a wonderful line in the play which says, what is it? Bombs and petrol bombs and Molotov cocktails and stones can't do much damage to armoured cars. But words can. Words inside people's heads of those people in the armoured cars can get into the heads of the people in the armoured cars.
Now, interestingly,
it's very powerful.
Athol Fugard wrote this when Nelson Mandela was still incarcerated. He has come on record saying that he never voted for the ANC because he believed that writers should always remain as outsiders. Did the two men ever meet, and what was the kind of...
I've actually no idea.
You don't know?
I don't know the answer to that, no.
I don't know if they met, but I was just going to say really quickly that the whole thing of writing, like if you look at the riots that are happening in America, a big argument is that, you know, if these shootings of young black men by white police officers would go unnoticed, if people didn't riot, if people didn't go up in arms, that's what actually pulls attention to the injustice that is happening. So it's the whole argument of would words alone get you anywhere? Sometimes you need a strong reaction. And Thami, my character,
but
he doesn't necessarily...
protesting surely is far better than throwing a Molotov cocktail.
Definitely.
Yes.
He doesn't necessarily believe that words don't have power. No, he doesn't necessarily believe... No, I'm talking from the perspective of my character, you know. He doesn't necessarily believe that words don't have power. He believes that it's a combination, you know, of
I think
the two.
It's a slow burn. That's the problem with words.
I mean, South Africa right now is still in a struggle with the migrant population and the problems there. There's been, you know, big attacks, large amount of attacks on migrants, and people are exiting the country in vast numbers. And the sort of the rainbow nation isn't as colourful as we'd all hoped it would be.
Well, yeah, they've even had problems in the university, Rhodes University, where students threw feces over the statue of Rhodes, I forget his name now.
Cecil
Rhodes, the founder of Rhodesia. Yes. They threw feces over his statue because they're unhappy that there's not representation of black people within the university. A lot of the lecturers are still white. And they feel like they don't have a voice, and they see this statue that epitomizes colonialism and represents inequality, and it's still there at the gates of their university. So,
Deborah, what are some of the challenges that you face staging a production like this?
Well, it's a very wordy play, and there are some incredibly long monologues, and so it's a challenge for us as a director to enable and help the actors to engage with the audience and not to lose the audience and take the audience on this journey. And it was also about finding 3 incredibly talented actors who were good at storytelling and could tell it with clarity and with truth. And I think we've found 3 remarkably talented actors, and I'm terribly proud of them.
Nathan, just tell me a little bit more about your character, Thami.
So Thami is a young black student in a Zolili high school, which is under the Bantu education scheme, which basically forces...
Do you have any ties to South Africa at all?
So I'm of West African heritage. My dad is from Sierra Leone. However, I was born 25 years ago, the date Nelson Mandela was released from prison, 11th of the 2nd, 1990. My middle name is Nelson, so the play has a resonance
meant to be,
with me.
clearly.
Yeah. Definitely, there's definitely a personal attachment to the play and the piece and what it stands for. You know, when I was born, people arrived with T-shirts, you know, saying "Free Nelson Mandela." So there's that personal attachment. But Thami is in the Zulu High School. He's under the Bantu education scheme, which, you know, is a Western education scheme. It doesn't encourage his traditional heritage. The Xhosa, you know, heritage is completely pushed to the sidelines and not encouraged. He learns about Western poets and the Western way of life, and he's an intelligent man. He can see what's going on around him. He can see the suffering of his people, and he's not happy. And he knows that there's more out there for him. And he doesn't think his teacher, who is a bright and intelligent man who he admires, is doing himself or Thami justice by following the Bantu education scheme. So he seeks to rebel against it by boycotting the classes. Not pulling down statues necessarily or throwing Molotov cocktails, by boycotting the classes, which is a democratic.
The play has been staged many times by many different production companies. Some have said it can make for quite uncomfortable viewing.
I think it certainly had an incredibly profound effect on audiences. I mean, I knew it was a special play and has something very important to say. I don't think I ever expected it to have the reaction that it's having. I mean, people are just stamping feet, standing ovations, cheering, and coming back a second and third time to see it. And you know, these are black audiences. These are South Africans, white South Africans. And
where can people watch this?
At the Tristan Bates Theatre near Covent Garden, and it's on until the 16th of May.
Okay.
Just in terms of it being uncomfortable to watch, the designer, Nancy, has made an amazing a barbed wire, so that there's a barbed wire up which the audience watch the play through.
It's very evocative and provocative.
Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.